There's a very specific kind of relief you feel when you talk about your pain online. Not the relief that comes from healing, not the kind that comes from honesty, but a softer one, a short-lived release, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. It feels good in a strange way, almost comforting. Someone sees you, someone hears you, someone validates you. In a world where your suffering often feels invisible, finally being witnessed feels like a kind of medicine. And maybe that is why you do it, not out of weakness, but out of a very human desire to not suffer alone. But there's a part of that relief you rarely acknowledge, a part that feels good for reasons you don't fully understand. Because when you share your pain online, you bypass something essential: vulnerability without risk. You get comfort without closeness, connection without exposure, empathy without intimacy. You get to express the wound without facing the silence that would meet you if you tried to express it in real life. And that's why it feels good, because it gives you the illusion of being understood without requiring the courage of being fully seen. But what you don't notice, at least not immediately, is how slowly this begins to hollow you out. Because every time you talk about your pain online, you reinforce something quietly devastating: that you don't expect comfort from the people actually in your life, that your emotions feel safer with strangers than with the ones who know you, that your vulnerability feels easier when it costs nothing. That intimacy has become something you outsource instead of cultivate. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. Though you'd never say it out loud, the fact that the world taught you how to express your emotions publicly before it taught you how to communicate them privately. The fact that your deepest fears feel too heavy for the people around you, so you hand them to an algorithm instead. The fact that you've built a life where the only place you feel safe, being honest, is in a comment box. And it's not your fault. No one taught you how to process your own feelings. No one taught you where to put your pain. No one taught you how to sit with your emotions long enough for them to make sense. So you learn to express them the only way the modern world rewards: quickly, loudly, publicly, impulsively. But here is the truth you avoid every time you press post. The comfort you feel is real, but the healing is not. Because when you share your pain online, something subtle happens inside you. You begin to define yourself through the emotion you're re-expressing. You begin to build an identity around being misunderstood, being hurt, being broken, not because you want to, but because vulnerability that gets attention becomes vulnerability you repeat. People don't talk about this, but they should. The internet teaches you to become the version of yourself that gets the most validation. And pain gets validation. Suffering gets engagement. Wounds get attention. Struggle gets rewarded, because people resonate with the parts of you that match their own sadness. And suddenly your pain becomes content, something that serves a purpose beyond your healing. It becomes a performance you don't realize you're giving. And slowly, piece by piece, without anyone warning you, you start living for the next moment. Someone will say, "I feel that too." You start posting not because the pain is too heavy to hold, but because the silence feels too heavy to face. You start turning your inner life into something externally curated, and the line between vulnerability and performance dissolves so gently you barely notice it's gone. But here's what's quietly destroying you. Pain shared too early becomes pain repeated. Pain shared too publicly becomes pain performed. Pain shared without intention becomes pain reinforced. And pain shared for validation becomes pain you cling to because you don't know who you are without it. There's a strange paradox that comes with expressing yourself online. You feel understood, but you don't feel known. You feel seen, but you don't feel held. You feel validated, but you don't feel relieved. You feel connected, but you don't feel closer to anyone. Because the comfort you're getting isn't intimacy, it's exposure. And exposure feels warm for a moment, like sunlight, but stay under it long enough, and it burns. And maybe you sense that burn already. The way your mind spirals after posting something vulnerable, even if people respond with kindness. The way your emotions feel heavier, not lighter, after sharing them. The way you begin to feel more fragmented, more lost, more dependent on the next moment of validation. The way the pain never actually fades, it just circulates between you and the screen. Because pain doesn't heal when it's shared with everyone. It heals when it's held by someone. Someone who knows you, who loves you, who sees you outside the frame of the moment. Someone who won't scroll past you. Someone real. But real connection requires risk. It requires showing up imperfectly. It requires being vulnerable without performing it. It requires intimacy, not attention. And that is the one thing the internet can't give you. Yet your brain has been conditioned to confuse one for the other. Conditioned to believe that because your pain was witnessed, it was cared for. But witnessing is not the same as holding. And validation is not the same as healing. You don't need more people to see your pain. You need fewer people to help carry it. And that's exactly where the next part of your story begins. And maybe the most dangerous part of all this is the way it changes your relationship with yourself without you ever noticing. Because every time you express your pain online, you take a shortcut around discomfort, around silence, around the emotional labor of sitting with your own wounds long enough for them to transform you. You release the pressure too quickly. You open the valve before the feeling has a chance to teach you something. And every time you do that, you weaken the muscle you need most in life. The ability to hold yourself. It feels like release, but what you're actually doing is abandoning yourself at the exact moment you need yourself the most. You outsource the weight before learning how to carry it. You share the wound before understanding it. You translate the emotion into performance before allowing it to become clarity. And the tragedy is that every time you do this, you train your mind to believe you cannot survive your own feelings without an audience. You don't process your pain. You broadcast it. You don't sit with it. You post it. You don't understand it. You let strangers interpret it for you. And little by little, you stop trusting your own emotional instincts. You stop trusting your inner voice. You stop trusting your ability to hold anything privately. You become emotionally dependent on digital witnesses, on faceless validation, on instant responses, on the illusion that someone out there gets it, even though they only understand the version you perform. And maybe you haven't realized how much this is costing you, not just in focus or identity, but in intimacy. Real intimacy, the kind that requires patience, time, presence, and vulnerability that isn't packaged for public consumption. Because the more you share your pain online, the more guarded you become offline. The more people praise your vulnerability, the more afraid you become of being vulnerable in real life. The more attention you receive for suffering, the harder it becomes to imagine yourself without it. And the more you curate your inner world for an audience, the more impossible it becomes to inhabit it alone. You learn to speak your truth publicly, but forget how to feel it privately. You learn to articulate your wounds, but forget how to heal them. You learn to let people see your pain, but forget how to let people hold you through it. And the worst part, the part that quietly destroys you, is that you begin to mistake the reaction for the resolution. You think that because someone left a comment, the pain has moved through you, but it hasn't. It has simply been externalized. It sits, terre unfinished, unresolved, waiting for the next moment you will express it again. Louder this time, clearer this time, expecting relief that never comes. And slowly, the story you tell online becomes the story you tell yourself. You begin to narrate your life as if someone is watching. You start analyzing your pain for how relatable it will be. You begin to anticipate how your suffering will be received. You rehearse your emotions instead of experiencing them. You express feelings before you even process them. You start living as a character instead of a person. And when that happens, you lose something precious. The ability to heal from within. Because real healing is not performance. It doesn't happen under observation. It doesn't happen when you're being watched. Healing requires privacy, slowness, silence, time, all the things the modern world has taught you to fear. Healing is not photogenic. Healing is not aesthetic. Healing is not a confession. Healing is not a post. Healing is a quiet, uncomfortable, deeply private reconstruction of yourself. And the internet cannot do that with you. It can only watch. But when you share your pain online, again and again, you rob yourself of the chance to go inward. You rob yourself of the solitude required for transformation. You rob yourself of the intimacy required for real connection. You rob yourself of the personal responsibility required for emotional maturity. And maybe without realizing it, you rob yourself of the version of you that could exist beyond your suffering. Because pain, when repeated publicly, becomes part of your identity. You start to think your sadness is your personality. You start to believe your trauma is your story. You start to internalize the idea that your value is tied to your vulnerability. You start to fear who you would be without something to confess. But you were never meant to live like this. You were never meant to build a sense of self from the empathy of strangers. You were never meant to process your emotions in a public square. You were never meant to externalize every inner shift the moment it appears. You were meant to learn how to sit with yourself, how to breathe through discomfort, how to understand your own mind, how to talk to the people who actually know you, how to let intimacy shape you instead of attention. And this is where the truth becomes uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. Sharing your pain online doesn't just stop your healing, it replaces it. It gives you a counterfeit version of what you truly need. You get attention instead of connection. You get validation instead of support. You get resonance instead of repair. You get visibility instead of understanding. You get comfort instead of growth. You get relief instead of resolution. You get temporary belonging instead of long-term healing. And the longer you rely on that, the harder it becomes to build real relationships. Because real relationships require vulnerability you cannot curate. Vulnerability you cannot edit. Vulnerability that doesn't receive likes or comments or instant reassurance. They require a vulnerability that is messy, unpredictable, risky, intimate. The kind that forces you to be seen without the safety of performance. And maybe that's what scares you the most. Because online, you can control the narrative. Offline, you can only tell the truth. But the truth is where you heal, not the audience, not the echoes, not the strangers. The truth, raw, unfiltered, unperformed, shared with someone who actually stays. Someone who looks you in the eyes. Someone who can sit with the heaviness. Someone who doesn't scroll past you. Someone who holds the silence with you. Someone who cares enough to stay through the parts that aren't pretty. Someone real. Because in the end, pain doesn't destroy you. Isolation does. And public vulnerability, ironically, makes you more isolated than ever. You don't need more witnesses. You need more closeness. You don't need more exposure. You need more honesty. You don't need more attention. You need more connection. And connection will never come from people who only know your pain. It will come from people who know you.